Hello everyone, Ace here, and today's video is going to be yet another example of me using the quote logic unquote of far leftists in order to argue against some of their own demands. And it's going to be over a specific topic that I have covered at least twice so far, namely the subject of female space marines. So today let's talk about how the Templin Institute is being transphobic for demanding the inclusion of female space marines into the lore of Warhammer 40K. And yes, you did indeed hear that claim correctly. And don't worry, we will be getting to that. But first of all, it is important to note that the Templin Institute is a fake fan YouTube channel with about 500,000 subscribers that recently called for the inclusion of female space marines on Twitter, as well as openly stating plans for making a video tomorrow over this very topic. Or at least tomorrow from the time that this video uploads. And don't worry, this video is supposedly going to debunk all the claims being made by the actual fans of Warhammer 40K as to why this is a bad idea. So with this in mind, I hope you'll understand why I've decided to throw my hat in the ring with this particular video. And while I could talk about the lore reasons as to why this is the case, it's very clear that the Templin Institute does not care about the lore in the slightest, because the people running the Templin Institute are clearly far leftist activists, the sort of people that want to artistically rape Warhammer 40K by forcefully inserting their agenda into the lore against the consent of the fandom at large. And make no mistake, that is exactly what is being attempted here. So instead of using the traditional lore arguments, I have decided to once again use the quote logic unquote of the far leftists to undermine their own demands. So with this in mind, let's now move on to how it would be considered transphobic by far leftist reasoning to introduce female space marines into the lore of Warhammer 40K. And the answer, in short, is because the process of making a space marine ends up altering their DNA to such an extreme extent that they become genetically incompatible with normal humans and cannot reproduce with normal humans. In other words, the end result is that space marines become a brand new species. A species that, according to the current lore, is made up exclusively of one sex. And this, dear viewer, is the key detail. For if a species has one and only one sex, then that means that any beings of that particular species are all non-binary, since you need two sexes in order to have a binary gender system. Thus, in technical terms, the Space Marines are all trans non-binary. And thus, because of this fact, the very act of adding a female sex to the Space Marine species would reintroduce the binary sex system, and thus the Space Marines would no longer be fundamentally trans non-binary. It would therefore, according to the logic of the far left, be an erasure of trans non-binary representation, and thus would be fundamentally transphobic by their own standards. And that, dear viewer, would make the people running the Templin Institute bigots for daring to demand such an erasure of diversity. The simple truth is that, according to the logic of the far left, the Templin Institute needs to sit down and accept the trans non-binary Space Marines bigot. And yes, I do find it highly cathartic to use their own rules against them, and make these far leftists realize what utter scumbags they are even by their own rules. That said, I also am of the opinion that it is nevertheless one of the most effective methods at countering such demands. Because simply put, these people do not care about the lore. For as I've previously mentioned, the people behind the Templin Institute want to forcefully insert their agenda into the lore of Warhammer 40K, and do so against the consent of the fandom at large. And so while I am of course of the opinion that the lore needs to be protected from these people, and that lore reasons should be presented in countering them, I am also of the opinion that once again, it will come to arguments such as the one I have presented here to fully put this debate to rest. Because once we start pointing out that these people are bigots by their own reasoning, that's something that they simply cannot counter. And on that subject, I will be paying attention to the video that the Templin Institute puts out on this matter, if for no other reason than to see if they actually try to counter this argument. And make no mistake, I have actually presented it to them, meaning that they have had access to it and have most certainly seen it. So of course I will be keeping my ear to the ground on this matter, and keeping you all informed should any more news come. But in any case, this has been Ace. Hope to see you guys again soon. Take care. Ace out.